Hi everyone, my name is Debra Meal and I am the president and the founder of the Meal Foundation. I am an ordained minister and I'm also a certified clinical hypnotherapist, and I do a variety of things, but today I'm going to talk to you about joyful transformation. In 2002, I married my soulmate. He was absolutely an amazing individual, is an amazing individual, and he's probably the most intelligent, gifted, creative, and sensual man I'd ever met. 18 months after we got married, he was diagnosed with bipolar disorder, and our life shifted dramatically. What I learned in that experience of going through that is that you can have a plan for your life, and that plan can change radically. And I want you to know that even though I married him, I certainly didn't understand the way that my life was going to transform and the way that it was going to evolve. What I learned through that process is the more that you resist change, the less joyful that you become. As you resist change, what happens is you get dug in as the spirit of your understanding, the divineness of your understanding, however it is you want to call your particular God, tries to move you. The more dug in that we get, the harder it is to make that change. My life changed, his life changed, our family changed. There was no part of our lives with his illness that changed, that did not change. And so as I started that transformation, what I learned that pain is inevitable in this life and suffering is optional. And what that means is that we're going to have things in our life that we don't like, but what happens is that when we lend our opinion to those particular events and those traumas that happen in our life, when we get dug in, what happens is that we start to embody a victim consciousness. And as we embody that victim consciousness, we get our friends and our family and all of our loved ones to get on board with us about how bad it is, which then reinforces that particular victim consciousness that we're going through. And it's not that we should like bad things happening to people, because we don't. We don't like bad things to happen to us. We don't like trauma to happen to us. But what happens is that when we experience that, and then we're told about how awful it is, how terrible it is, how unfair it is, we then become dug in regards to that particular story. And then what happens is once we get stuck, we actually heap more and more suffering onto ourselves. And what happens then is that we get into a cycle of suffering that we're unable, without the right skills, to get out of. And so what I'm here to talk to you today is about joyfully being able to transform. We're told from the time that we're really little that change is hard. And if you believe that, then change is hard, because I guarantee you that what you think about, you will manifest. And if you believe that change is hard, and if you have been told from the time that you were little that you like to do things the hard way, that again, you will start to manifest that in your life. And none of us wants to be beaten up by the Spirit. None of us wants to take, again, our medicine harshly. None of us wants that bitter medicine all the time. And so what happens is when you shift your thinking and you then begin to pray for your lessons to come to you easy, they do. That's the nice thing, is that you can actually step into the divine flow of things so that your lessons actually start to come to you much easier. So as you step into your lessons coming easier, and you step into willingness, and you step into transformation, what happens within that is that you step into your true authenticity. As you step into your authenticity, you then create a vortex. And that's the only way that I can describe it to you. And as you step into your vortex, you get closer to joy and to happiness. The more joy and happiness that you can bring into your life, the bigger the vortex then starts to spin, and the more powerful that it spins within your life to be able to make that kind of transformation that you're looking for. So I came from, I like to say that I came from absolutely poor white trash. And I lived in a trailer with my grandmother. My mother died when I was 2, and I was stuck in my story of what that part of the family looked like. I had one side of the family that was very, very successful, and then another side of the family that was not successful. And that side of the family that was not successful was heaped in misery, heaped in physical illness, and heaped in stinking thinking. And I can remember being about 4 years old thinking to myself, I was surrounded by crazy people. I had no idea why I was where I was at. I had no idea why the family that I was surrounded by didn't understand me. I certainly at 4 couldn't understand why my mother had been taken from me at such a young age. But what I did know was that somehow I was cut from a different fabric, and that fabric was one of survival. So as I started my young age, I want you to know I left home at 16. I was told by all of my relatives that I was making a terrible mistake. I want you to know it wasn't a mistake for me to leave. And as I left, I then began to study and to understand more about life, again, outside of my surroundings that I was in. One of the things that I believe at a deep, deep core level is that we are spiritual beings having a human existence. And if we are spiritual having a human existence, then what I need to know is that there's a scripture, Romans 12, 1 and 2, that says that by the transforming and renewing of your mind, you will know the perfect will of God. Now that's a really powerful statement if you think about it. The transforming and renewing of your mind. And the very interesting thing is that when we get into that, practicing that mindfulness, and we actually accept that we can transform and renew our minds, things start to happen. So I had spent years trying to figure out how to meditate, how to do a variety of different kinds of meditation practices, and it didn't come to me until I was trained in dialectical behavioral therapy. So as a skills trainer of DBT, in mindfulness, there's the what skills and the how skills. The what skills of dialectical behavioral therapy help you understand about observation and actually be able to, again, to watch your own thinking. As you watch your own thinking, what happens is that you're able to make choice. And the way that we know that is our thoughts plus our emotion equal our behavior. 100% of the time. It's actually a scientific formula. So if you want to change an action, and it doesn't matter what that action is, it doesn't matter if it's an addiction, it doesn't matter if it's picking up your clothes, it doesn't matter if it's about doing laundries on Monday, it doesn't matter what the action is. If you want to change your action, you either have to change your thought process about the action, or you have to change your emotional response to doing or having or being that particular action. That's it. We like to try to fancy it up in a variety of different ways, but it's either your thoughts or your emotions that are going to be able to make the change. So as I become mindful, I'm then able to start to think about what I want to change. And I do that because I'm using that gray matter behind my eyebrows called my prefrontal cortex. Your prefrontal cortex, best explained, is your insight, your hindsight, and your foresight. So it's the ability to look at my mistakes, it's the ability to stay in the present, and it's the ability to anticipate what's going to happen in the future. So what happens is when I get locked into my particular story about life, it means that I'm rehearsing everything about my past if I'm locked into it. So, for example, if I'm standing up here and I take out my trusty gun and I shoot her, I want you to know that I take up time and space, the gun takes up time and space, she takes up time and space, this event takes up time and space. And what we know is that reality is always time times space equals reality. 15 minutes later when the police come, because they will come, each one of you will have a different story about that particular event. You'll think about, again, how tall I am, my voice inflection. You'll decide if I'm white or not white. You'll make all kinds of judgments about the way that I speak, about the way that I'm dressed, about the way that I'm up here on stage. You'll decide if I am rich, poor, all of that you'll make a decision about. And that's because as human beings, we've been trained since birth to make meaning out of everything. And we do that because of our fight and flight response. We're trained to make meaning out of things because it's a survival instinct to do that. So part of mindfulness is making sure that you're not in judgment all of the time. So when I talked about the what skills, there's also the how skills then, again, about mindfulness. So if I'm going to choose mindfulness, what I need to make a decision about is my judgments. And we all make judgments all the time. And so is that helpful in any particular situation? If somebody walks in front of my booth and I'm looking at their clothes or their hair or the way they walk or the way they talk, I have to make a decision if I want to be in that judgmental space or not. If I don't want to be in that judgmental space, I get to a fork in the road in my thinking and I choose to think something differently. And that's what mindfulness is about. If you don't understand mindfulness, we can talk about alpha, theta, brain waves, and doing trance work, and hypnosis and meditation and all those things. But if you don't understand that you have the ability to control your own thinking, none of those things matter. Absolutely none of those things matter. Because your ability to control your own thinking is basically the one thing that you get to do. We always say it's die and pay taxes. It may be some of that too, but the main thing is that you actually get to be able to control your own thinking. When you control your own thinking, you're then able to make choices in your skill level to raise your threshold to tolerate distress. Now, again, I've been through some pretty stressful things in my life in regards to my health and my marriage and my children, just like everybody else on the planet. And I want you to know as of last year, 800,000 people committed suicide. It's a big number. 800,000 people. And they do that, those acts are acts of desperation by people who are unable to tolerate their distress any longer. We used to, thousands of years ago, teach distress tolerance skills. It was taught by the elders, by the grandmothers, by the great-grandmothers, by the great-great-grandmothers. Again, simple things that the Buddhists tell us, like chop wood, carry water. It's a simple thing. If I have something that I'm thinking about that I find distressing, one of the things that I can do is just simply do the dishes. We don't teach that skill anymore. What we do teach is people how to get on social media and to tell all their friends and their family how bad it is and how awful it is and how terrible it is. And those things then, again, are not skill building, and they don't raise your tolerance in regards to the stressful situation that you're going through at that time. So mindfulness means I'm paying attention on purpose. I am intentionally living in this present moment. Believe it or not, it's a skill to have something terrible go on at home and to go to work and not talk about that terrible thing to all of your coworkers. Okay? People that, again, have to be continually validated, again, emotionally tend to suck again, all of the energy from the room. And there's many, many ways to actually help shield yourself so that you don't take on that energy. But believe it or not, it's an actual skill to press your lips together and not share with everyone in, again, your vicinity. Tolerance means in this particular moment, I'm unable to fix a particular problem. It means I'm going to have to tolerate it. It means I'm going to have to live with it in this moment. And what do I do to act opposite as I'm tolerating something uncomfortable? Again, one of the skills is to be able to act opposite in any particular situation. I don't know, I've been in, had a checker at Walmart check me out incredibly slowly. And it's a question of standing there, breathing in, breathing out, pressing my lips together, and deciding in this moment that I'm going to tolerate this particular thing. I'm not going to bark at her. I'm not going to huff myself around. I'm not going to roll my eyes. I'm not going to do any of that. I'm just going to breathe in and breathe out and stay in that present moment. As I stay in that present moment and I choose not to do any of those things, what I'm doing is I'm choosing my thinking, and at the same time I'm choosing my emotion. And I can be impatient. I can feel that impatience rise up, and I can release it and let it go. Your emotions, believe it or not, only last 8 minutes. Scientific fact. Well, what happens if I'm sad all day? Or what happens if my dog dies and I cry all day? Well, what happens is your emotion peaks at about 8 minutes. That's about the time, if you're crying, that you get the hiffles, right? That stuff that happens, okay? And then it feels better. And what we do, if we're not, again, coached or trained or given skills, is we grab a hold on that emotion again because we feel sad. We feel sad for what's happened. And we will then, again, experience that emotion again. And then it will peak where you get the hiffles again, okay? And then it will begin to reduce again. And instead of having somebody say, hey, you know what, this is a tragedy. I understand that this is a really big loss. But, you know, let's you and I go for a walk. Let's you and I go to the park. Let's you and I go to the movies. Those are all acts. Those are all activities that, again, turn my thinking. And there's nothing wrong with having your thinking turned away from, again, a distressful event. It's okay. If you can't solve the event in that moment, you can turn your thinking again and make changes. So I can contribute. I can bake cookies and take them to my neighbor. Something as simple as that. I can do my children's laundry. I can make sure that my husband's sock drawer has got the socks in the right order for him, whatever the case may be. I can contribute in some way. I can make a comparison. My comparison is always, if it's not as bad as Auschwitz, I can live through anything. That's the bottom line. It was a terrible thing. So again, I can look at those types of comparisons, and then I can begin counting my blessings. It doesn't matter what situation I'm in. If I'm alive and I'm breathing and I'm doing relatively okay, and I've got clothes and I've got some kind of food and a little bit of shelter, I'm really doing quite well. In fact, I'm doing better than about 80% of the rest of the people on the planet. So I need to, again, continually attempt to feel blessed, if nothing else. Opposite emotion, I tell people that, again, if you're in a position in your life where things aren't going well, it's probably not time to listen to that Somebody Done Somebody Wrong song, okay? This is not where you listen to the country western music where she takes a Louisville Slugger to both headlights, slash a hole in all 4 tires, and carves her name into his leather seats. Don't do that. Okay. Believe it? Yeah, yeah. I want you to know, I really do have 20-year-old clients that I have to remind those are acts of violence, and we don't do those. Karmically, it's bad. It's bad energy. There's all kinds of bad things, and it continues to create a cycle of suffering. People that live in drama, one dramatic event after another, whether, again, they don't pay their rent, they don't take care of their kids, they don't go to work on time, they, again, have a problem with their job, they have a problem with, again, their spouses, the people that they work with. Their entire life is in chaos and in drama. I guarantee you they do not have a skill set to fix that. So again, this is part of that skill set. What happens in your life is that you become either willing or unwilling. And willingness just means that I've decided that I don't have to be right all of the time. I don't have to be righteous all of the time. I'm willing to do what's just needed in the moment. Now, I can change my mind 10 minutes later if it doesn't work, but in the moment, I'm just going to participate in life and be willing. As I do this, I have to remember that, again, hungry, angry, lonely, tired. This body is a temple. Every single major religion teaches that. If you're not fixing the temple on a regular basis, if you're not honoring this temple, if you think that eating ding-dongs and ho-hos in the morning for breakfast and chugging it with chocolate milk is going to help your brain think better, I guarantee you it won't. If you are out of the law of cause and effect, if you are living yourself outside of the law doesn't change. We just break ourselves against the law. And as you look around, I want you to know all of the cultures, not just this culture, not just where I'm from, but people are attempting to break themselves against the law. And they do that in regards a lot of time to the way that they eat and the way they sleep and the way that they take care of themselves, the drugs that they take, the drugs that they don't take. All of those things affect this particular temple, and you don't have to like this temple. You don't have to like the fact that you got the body that you got. The fact of the reality is this is the body that you got. This is the cards you were dealt. And if you're dealt the cards that you've got, you can throw them down and walk off, or you can just play the hand that you've got. It's a real simple choice. And if, in fact, you've thrown them down, it's okay to pick them back up and to say, you know what, I've decided to play these cards because this is the reality in this particular moment. So I'm going to play these cards to the best of my ability, and this is how I'm going to live my life. When you step into your authenticity, when you step into the fact and you unite heaven and earth together, and you realize that you are that point that unites heaven and earth together, that the divine of your understanding gets to move through you, gets to speak through you, and quite frankly, gets to experiencing life through you. When you step into that knowledge with that skill set that says that you are, again, a spiritual being having a human experience, your life changes. I can only tell you from personal experience, it gets happier, it gets more joyful. You make a decision about the people that you're going to have in your life, about the people that you're not going to have in your life. You no longer listen to your family and your friends decide what's right for you. You have an inherent connection to the divine because by the transforming and renewing of your mind, you know the perfect will of God. And it's not just a Bible quote. All of the major religions teach exactly the same thing. Your mind is the biggest gift that you have, and it's only through your experience and only through your willingness that, again, you're able to share that with others. I'm at booth 150. You can come by and talk to me. We put on spiritual retreats for women. I specialize in trauma and in PTSD. And again, we actually help people be able to, women especially, be able to stand in their own power, to recognize their own stories, and quite frankly, change their lives. So if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer any of those now. Mm-hmm.
Learn and teach and coaching in the future. How would I go about do that?
Well, you can contact me, and I can certainly, provide some information to you about how to do that. Happy to do that.
And how long is the course?
Well, I don't actually have a course. I'm actually trained in dialectical behavioral therapy, and that's a 6-month process. You go into a clinical training for a week. It's a 6-month process that most therapists actually have to then, they write a clinical paper and they have to have a client review, and then it's another week back, again, for that particular training. Usually it's a master's in social work. I had a doctorate in divinity, so because I was running a foundation where I was going to have actual clinical therapists also, that's why they allowed me into the program.
Thank you.
Anybody else? You were so brave. First question out of the box.
Yeah.
Where are your retreats?
We are an hour south of Houston, Texas, but I understand the Sunshine Coast is a great place to have one, somebody told me. I've actually had several people say that.
Yeah.
So.
Do you do any counseling?
I do. And I have a our website, there's actually a coaching page, and so if you click on that, you can actually book an appointment.
Specifically, what feel like relationship, like on every level?
Dialectical behavioral therapy is really interesting because it doesn't matter what the problem is. There's 4 ways to solve any problem. You can fix the problem, you can tolerate the problem, you can change your emotional response to the problem, or you can stay miserable. The choice is completely up to you.
How would I know that I'm in it? Like when I'm in it is like it takes me a while to
You're
get
either
out.
in joy or you're not in joy.
The only way it tells my body hurt, that's like, oh shoot.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like,
If your body hurts all the time, one of the things that we know about depression and things like fibromyalgia is directly connected to depression and your serotonin in your brain, which tells me that somehow you're not in joy. And by the way, I don't have a problem with medications. If people need medications, lots of times they need medication as a bridge to be able to, again, receive information. But medication is not the answer. 10,000 years ago, we didn't have SSRIs, and we didn't have nearly as many people kill themselves. So you got to ask yourself, what's the difference? So I'm really, really focused on the fact that there is not a pill. If you're married to the wrong person and you're in the wrong job, there's not a pill for that. And that's what we're doing to people. Doctors spend 15 minutes with you and they hand you a pill. And again, some people need medication. But the problem is that, again, there's no counseling that's going on by those doctors. They don't say, hey, by the way, you know what, the reason that you're depressed is because you go home and your husband tells you that, you know, how terrible you are and wants to beat the crap out of you. That's going to make anybody depressed. Again, the pill doesn't fix that.
yeah, well, I have someone in the family with critical illness,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm going to the way like you, that's what the principle, you know, the conservative, the natural way, you know,
Right.
The least intervention, what is natural.
Mm-hmm.
But that person hasn't opened it up or hasn't listened, or if I do it too much, they think they're pressures, and
Right.
I don't know what to do. It's like,
Okay. Yes, sir.
Does this work for chemical sensitivity?
You know, it does, because what happens with chemical sensitivities lots of times is it has to do with your energy meridians and your chakras. And so one of the things that I do is that I can work with people, and I can do that either in person or, again, energetically. They don't have to be in my presence. But lots of chemical sensitivities have to do with your chakras being out of balance, which usually has to do with traumas. So I do some of that work too.